Good evening. Today we have a guest from far away country. You can say a guest from across the seas. Today we have a friend from US. Rita Pearson has very aptly quoted, every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists that they become the best that they can possibly be. Our guest for tonight is a versatile educationist who has been working for children for over 25 years now. She's none other than Miss Cori Berg from Dallas, Texas. Cori has been a teacher, director, advocate, trainer, and a consultant in the field of early childhood education for over 25 years in public, private, and faith based settings. Her professional interests include incorporating the arts in the curriculum, team building, educator resilience. She is the executive director of Hope Day School in Dallas, Texas. She is the creator of ECE from the Heart with Cori Berg, a Facebook page and community to support educators and administrators. She was awarded the 2020 Administrator of the Year by the Texas Association for the Education of Young Children. Let's welcome Ms. Cori Berg. Good morning for US and good evening from India.
Yes, I was all ready to switch that in my head. Good evening to you, and it's early morning here. It's about 8:30 in the morning.
Great. And thanks for accepting our invitation at a short notice.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So, as you know, the topic for tonight is pandemic versus education. Hope to cope up and normalize. There in US, things have started normalizing. But here, still in India, we are under lockdown. Our schools are closed since more than a year now. And children are at times enjoying, at times they are frustrated, at times they're just thinking, when is this going to get over? They were very happy when the schools were to reopen, but then again we had a very bad attack of pandemic and everything, we had to take a big U-turn. So you being there, and you might be hearing about Indian lockdown and the pandemic that has affected the second wave over here. So ma'am, what would you say, for because you are an expert in early childhood education, right? So
yeah, I mean, it must be so hard. It kind of feels like, it must feel like you were at the edge of a cliff and you just got pushed over and you're holding on by a branch, right?
Exactly.
Our experience here, even though we have this common experience of the pandemic, it's so different. We started locking down in March of 2020. My own center stayed open because I serve families. I'm right near the medical district here in Dallas, Texas, and many of my families are medical workers. And so while all the other centers were closing down, we actually stayed open. And at that time, we had no guidance whatsoever on keeping children safe. And slowly but surely, we would get one little tidbit and then another tidbit. And so it was a very fearful time. And now, it is starting to open up. Things are looking better with access to the vaccine. But here in the US, we have something a little bit different. Our children, although the numbers are going down, our children still aren't vaccinated. So they are still at risk. And so while some of the families are vaccinated, it does reduce risk, but it hasn't taken away all risk. And so we have to make choices. Each center has to make a choice on what we're going to do to keep kids safe. My particular center, we have always been very conservative. So while some centers are getting very close back to normal, we still aren't. We're still exactly the same way as we were, almost the same as we were in March of 2020, until these children Until families have the opportunity to vaccinate their children, we're going to still be following everything. But in India, you all are in a different place. I mean, it's been a year and a half of not being in person. And I just cannot imagine, that is now normal to these young children.
Yes.
Maybe that's one thing to just start with, is we put our adult lens on children, right? In my world, the big question was whether or not to mask children. And we put children in masks in order to help keep them safe. And now the children, that's just what they know. They don't, it's not an emotional thing to cover up your face for them. It's what they know. A whole year and a half of a 3-year-old's life, they've been wearing a mask. And for you all, probably those children now, that's what they know is time at home, right? But I think a high priority needs to be placed on the mindset of the adults. What I have found is that children follow the adult's lead. And so if the adult is anxious and the adult is fearful and the adult is worried, that is how the child is going to respond. But if the adult, tries to stay calm and tries to stay centered and tries to still live a full life, even within the bounds of being at home or being within strict COVID protocols, like at my center, children can still live a very joyous life from day to day, even amidst really difficult circumstances.
Exactly. And that is what, I would request you to suggest our early childhood educators and parents what all measures and what all things can be done so that the kids start feeling normal. Because right now there are some kids who started learning online.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it is. We all do this in a bit of a different way. So as I said, that I have always been very protective of the children. I have not wanted to deny the risks to kids. And we're trying to look at the whole child, right? So we're trying to keep them physically safe, but also intellectually stimulated and keep their spirits high. And so really making sure that you're staying in check with all of that. But the key piece that I have seen witnessing children day to day as an educator in person is this very magical spiritual connection between the adult and the child. And one thing that we have that was really, I think everybody kind of has their eyes on this a little bit, is with infants. I'm actually sitting right next to one of my infant rooms. So I've got 10 babies next door to me. And so if you hear some crying, that's why. But, at the very beginning of the pandemic, when we were trying to figure out what exactly is the risk to children, and knowing that it definitely is a risk to the adults in the room, this up close contact, we started masking our teachers who were also working with infants. We did it with all the ages, but definitely with infants too. And there was some concern about that maybe these infants wouldn't be able to connect with us because all they can see is that part of your face, right? And what we know from science is that babies are drawn to the face, right? The eyes and the mouth. So our science has told us, wow, this isn't going to work, being masked like this. And yet the children defied science. Almost every person that I know that has masked adults has been
Yes.
has been amazed how well children have connected. I know normally I'm at the screening station this time of day, helping take temperatures of kids and well checks before they come into the building. And so the infants really only see me for about 5 minutes in the morning, not even 5 minutes, maybe only 2 minutes in the morning and 2 minutes in the afternoon when I'm helping escort them outside. Masked, they barely see me except 4 minutes total a day, and yet they recognize me because they know my voice, they know my mannerisms, they know I'm the person who wears loud colors, and they're able to connect with me. They feel my energy even though my face is covered. And to me, this has been a metaphor for everything regarding children and adults in the pandemic. The first is, don't underestimate the resilience of your children, that they have an inner drive to survive. They have an inner drive to connect under really difficult circumstances. They will continue to play even if they have nothing to play with. So let that take a little bit of worry off of your shoulders. Yes, it's not how we would want it to be. And yes, there will be some things that we will need to attend to as we get out of this. It may be that children don't know how to share toys as much or things like that because they haven't been playing in person with each other as much. But there are also some gifts of that time. The connection that they are getting from their parents by being home more may be a gift out of it. And so that's something that we can hold on to each day, even though it is not how we would want it to be, is to find what that gift is and what the positive is in it. Even though, I don't want to underestimate all the, heartache and death and horrible things that our families have gone through and the families in
Exactly.
India are going
Still,
through.
there's so many children, who've lost their parents at the age of as young as 2 years, 3 years, four
Yeah.
years. Either of the parent they've lost, either a mom or a dad,
Wow.
and they
Yeah,
are
the
really
number
literally
in the
they are
United
just suffering.
States, in the United States, I think the number is something, possibly when they look at the math behind it, is up to 43,000 children have had a parent die. And so it does make you think, what does that mean 5 years from now? When we have children in our schools, that many children who've had this kind of trauma, it means that we do need to really pay attention to trauma-informed practices. But that is
Yes,
something we should have been doing even prior to the pandemic.
exactly. If we would have been doing such things, and we wouldn't have even caught this. We would have
Yeah.
if we would have taken it seriously, things would have been different.
Well, I agree. This has been a really hard time mentally, and there are moments that you can get really trapped in bitterness and anger. There's two kinds of suffering. There's the suffering that we get from what is handed to us. And then there is the suffering that we create by how we respond and keep thinking and reflecting on what has happened to us, right?
Yes.
There are times that I was very bitter in this. I definitely had thoughts like you, Miss Rena, about people in our country who were not being careful and were having large parties without masks on and, doing things that were really dangerous. And there were moments that I was so frustrated, where I would personalize it. I'd see somebody go to a wedding and post pictures on Facebook, and it would feel like that person was the personal reason why I'm still stuck doing all these pandemic protocols. And at some point, I realized that my doing that wasn't helping, that I was hurting myself. And I had to kind of rein it in and go, accept. There was a level of acceptance to what has happened and to where we're at. I still take personal responsibility for myself and for caring for other people. I still do what I can to educate others. That's one reason that we connected, Miss Rena, is I began speaking on pandemic protocols in childcare because there wasn't anybody doing that. And through that, I've met people. And so it has connected us. But the point is, you can hold on to it and carry that anger from day to day, or you can come to an acceptance on it and just try to make the best of what this situation is. And I really think
Exactly.
that is where educators need to be at this point.
Very true. Right now, what's like we are still thinking whether we should send our kids to school or not because they are not vaccinated. And you cannot stop a kid from going and hugging his friend, his or her friend, or holding hands, playing together.
True. True.
So, what can be done so that
So,
things
right.
start slowing down at early age? What should the early education teachers start doing so that once the kids are back to school, it's not a
Okay.
mess again?
So let me just give you some of those things because I've had a year and a half to work on it. Right? So we know that social distancing is not possible with children, correct? They're not meant to. I'll tell you in the beginning, those of us who were still open, it's like, oh my goodness, do we put them in boxes? And some centers were actually doing that, like taping out the floor and telling children you have to stay in this box. And they got a lot of criticism. And though that's not what I would do, what I would say is look at the intent behind it. People were trying to keep people safe. We have since learned that we don't necessarily need to do that, right? There is a middle of the road approach, and that is first being very thoughtful about exclusion practices. So, as I said, I screen children in, I take their temperature. That's not everything because there are a lot of asymptomatic people who can still spread it, but it will catch some children and it will keep the parents very mindful about their child's symptoms and not sending their children to school sick. So we have kept that. And by keeping those screening practices, it has helped parents just off the bat. They have gone and gotten their child tested when they've had a cold or a runny nose or something like that. So very strict exclusion practices and very strict about sending children home immediately if they have any of the symptoms of COVID. And that's really going to be until there's opportunity for vaccination for these kids. So that is one thing. The next is creating pods of children and being really strict about that. So I have a large center. I have about 70 children on any given day. And so what we do normally, our program is 7 a.m. until 6 p.m. And what we had to do those longer hours is we would combine classes in the morning, the very first hour of the day, and combine classes the last hour of the day. And that way, each teacher only had to work an 8-hour shift or 8.5-hour shift. The first thing we had to do was reduce hours because we could no longer combine classes together. And so we went from 7 to 6 until 8 to 5. That took some compromise with parents. And, it may be a while longer until the CDC says we can combine classes. We're going to need to do this. So what that does is if one child has COVID and ends up exposing a group, they're only exposing that small group of children instead of the whole school. And what you also do is, as much as possible, try to keep those same teachers in those rooms and not moving from room to room. So we have lunch breaks and things like that. Normally, one teacher might go in there as an administrator. Until I got vaccinated, I didn't even go in the classroom. It was that protected. Like, every thought I had was, if that person has COVID, would we want them exposing the people in that room? And it just was very, very careful. And we kept that up a very long time. So I know it can be done. Once we were able to start getting vaccinated, then the staff members who were vaccinated had more ability to move and interact. So now I go in the room and play guitar for the kids. Now I can pick up a child. But we were that careful. I did not hold a child for over a year. I kept it as, if I had to screen a child, I tried to keep it as distant as I could, or as quick as I could, so that if I happened to be exposed, I wouldn't do that. And I'm going to tell you, it takes some sacrifice. It takes some rethinking and knowing in your head this is just temporary, even though it might take a long time. So there's that. We've done a lot with sanitizing, although here, at least in the US, the research that I've seen is the sanitizing really isn't the main thing. It really has to do with airflow, and is really one of the most important things. And then also we had everybody in masks. The children ages 2 and up were able to wear masks. They were able to, the children honestly transitioned much easier than adults did to wearing masks. And the adults, with our teachers, we actually wore a mask and a shield over the top, which seems so strange, doesn't it? But like I said, the kids just got used to it, and they connected to us through it. And my staff now who aren't vaccinated still wear the mask and the shield.
Right. So now the topic is pandemic versus education. Right? Education has really been impacted throughout the globe. Right? Schools are opening, then closing, then again reopening, and then again closing down.
Mm-hmm.
It's been like hide and seek with the school and the children.
Right.
Right. So now hope to cope up and normalize. Like you mentioned, that we have been trying all sorts of measures so that kids do not get the bug.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We were told, like there were news and all that, the second wave, the second stint is going to be dangerous. Now there is news, whether it's a rumor or what, the third wave is going to affect the children below 18 years of age.
Mm.
So in those circumstances, how can all of us, because we are still thinking how and what has to be done so that the kids do not get affected. We try not to send them out. We ban them from just moving out of the houses. Slowly, now we are opening up. The lockdown is being lifted slowly, with restrictions. So we hope that the schools reopen fast. But the measures like sanitization, this and that, how successful can it be? Because we have been trying that everything should be normal, right? Will sanitization and masking help, or there are more measures to be taken so that nobody gets affected? Because when teachers started going to school, there were so many teachers who caught COVID just because they had to travel from home to school.
Oh, because they're taking public transportation, like
Exactly.
public transit? Yeah.
Not every teacher can
Right.
afford taking their own vehicle to the school.
Right.
Even if they afford, the schools might not have that much of parking or so. So,
Okay. Yeah.
what healthy and convenient measures should be taken by schools so that this virus does not spread further?
Okay, Miss Serena, I'm going to dial it back just a little, go back in time, because I think from a mindset place, this is very similar to where I was last spring. I had a very good friend who kind of talked to me on the phone when it was clear I was one of the only centers that was open when all these other centers were closed. And she said to me, Cori, you have to be okay knowing that you don't have complete control over the safety in this situation. And that took me some, thinking. Again, this is at the beginning of the pandemic and it may seem so basic, but I think it does apply here. And so for me, I, in my mind, said, I am going to do everything I can do to protect both my children and my teachers. Because if somebody tests positive, I want to be able to say that I have done everything I could. But I also know that only takes me to a point. And then in working with centers through this last year, when I've been consulting with people in that and listening to them talk about the practices that they have done and how successful they have been, I can say that so for example, I've only had to shut down one time. That was at a few months into the pandemic, and it wasn't even for a child. It was for a parent who had tested positive. They don't do this anymore. But I haven't had to shut down any other time. Now, that doesn't mean that we haven't had asymptomatic people in here who may have been positive and I didn't know it. All I can say is nobody has gotten sick enough that it has been visible that they've had to go get tested, and it's come out positive. There is some hope, but part of that is a bit of luck. I mean, it is, because no matter what mitigation factors that I use as a school administrator, even so, a child could be a carrier and could come in and bring it. There is a level of acceptance there. But really watching the science on this, and the science is really important. And now we have a whole year of it. So those in India can be looking at the science that's coming out. Definitely in the US, they've been tracking. There is less spread in schools. We've had a lot less cluster cases than we ever expected. Because of what we have been doing, trying to keep kids in one room and not combining rooms, using outdoor spaces as much as possible helps with ventilation, using masks, being very mindful of exclusion practices. From an administrator level, I would say communication with your families and your staff has got to be at a very high priority. When I saw that my parents were starting to do play dates with people, I sent home letters about that and said, please consider the risk that you are taking, not just with your own child, but all these other children who are in school with your child when you do things like have a play date, because that might be the place that you're exposed. Really talking to people about their mindset. One thing that we saw, I don't know if you see it in India too, but people have a bias towards their own family and friends. And so people would get together with their friends and family members thinking they're going to be safe. And yet we've seen how dangerous that can be. right? One birthday party, there's stories, one birthday party and 10 people test positive and 5 people die. It's really serious. It takes commitment. My family, my parents live, just a short ways away from me, and I saw them once in a whole year, and that was just outside in their backyard and fully masked and protected. So it does take some sacrifice, but the hope is that it can make a difference. It doesn't make ultimate difference, but it does make quite a bit of difference. So when India is ready to start opening up, one thing you can do is be hopeful that you have friends from across the globe who have been doing it, who can help, and that you don't have to be so fearful that you are, that you can't move, right? There are things that you can do. And in the meantime, you've got your online school, we're all, figuring things out and trying to use what we have to keep these children and these families going.
Definitely. So like generally what we have been doing is that okay, we are teaching the children online.
Mm-hmm.
It's not only me. We are 100% virtual.
Right.
But there are the physical schools. There are the physical schools who are taking their online classes,
Mm-hmm.
right? But there are many instances when the children they want to be out, mingle up with the kids, their peers, their friends, but parents and we teachers we don't allow them. We say no, you're not going because you might
Mm-hmm.
catch the virus.
Right.
And seeing those little babies walking in mass, at times it's so appealing that okay, they are following the rules, but side by side somewhere we feel so bad for them that at this age they are facing this. But there are countries like Japan where wearing a mask has been since years.
Right. Right. Yeah. I mean, that was, back to these infants who have now started to calm down now that they've been dropped off and are playing with their friends. These infants, you know, we were so worried about them not seeing our faces when we're caring for them that we forgot something really simple. And that is, what about children whose parents, what about children who are blind, right? They can't see our faces. Do they connect with their parents? Absolutely. They know the
They
human body and the human spirit.
they recognize the touch and the voice, the
Yes,
smell.
so the other senses step up. So what you see, when schools started opening up or started thinking about opening up, what you started seeing is teachers really going, okay, now I need to do a lesson about masks. Or administrators were like, let me teach teachers how to work in a mask. And I just kind of chuckled because I'd been doing it all along. I was open. I didn't have time to put all these like trainings together. What I did was just observe what adults do naturally. They might be a little bit more animated in their talk. They might use gestures more when, instead of just smiling and wave, now I wave a lot more when I'm greeting people. You just naturally adjust. So it's not something that we have to worry about. People will do it naturally and be
Yeah, because
aware of
because
it.
this is going to be the new normal.
Right, for a time. And it may be that we keep masks for a bit.
For
It may be that we keep
exactly.
masks. It's more socially acceptable, like has been in some of the Asian countries, to wear a mask when you're sick, so you don't get other people sick. And maybe that's okay. I mean, think about children and families who have somebody who's immune compromised. Children there also have had to wear masks. And nobody looked at the families of children who might be going through chemotherapy or something like that and say, you're a horrible person for putting a mask on a child. No, we looked at them and said, you're doing something to help your child, keep them safe under these circumstances.
I think these things can easily be followed, and we have time. We can be very cautious because it's always said prevention is better than cure. So I think we can, if we follow the rules and regulations, we can prevent our children from getting the bug.
Yeah, I mean, well, what you can do is reduce transfer within your schools. That's the number one thing. I don't have the ability, I don't have control over what my families do in their personal lives. I can communicate with them. I can continue to help them see the bigger picture of their actions and help them bring it, keep in mind that what they do in their personal lives has an impact on all these other families, and that really was successful as I can see it. That doesn't mean that tomorrow I don't find somebody might test positive. The good news is there still is risk. We still need to be vigilant here in the United States. If I'm following our Center for Disease Control, which is our kind of guidance on it. But the good news is that the risk hasn't been as high as it has been for older adults. So, but what some people do is they look at that and they go, okay, then we don't need to do anything at all. I don't agree with that. We still, until families have the choice on vaccinating their children, if these children are in my care, I'm going to continue to follow these practices, or until our scientific governing body, our Center for Disease Control, says I don't need to anymore.
Definitely. So now the thing is, for all of us, all the principals, teachers, parents who are watching us, the only thing is that we need to be extra cautious. We
Yes.
need to follow the rules. We need to
Yeah.
follow the guidelines, whatever it may be. Okay, if we want to go out, prefer going out in open air spaces rather than
Yes.
closed spaces. Like, what happened was people started going to restaurants.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, because everybody gets fed up, eating the food cooked at home.
Right. Even though I would love an Indian mother to like cook me some homemade curry or something.
Definitely.
I'll take a restaurant as a second thing. That's the best I can do.
That's true.
Yeah,
Because
restaurants
Indian food
were,
is rich. No doubt. Indian food
yeah.
is rich.
Restaurants were one place that it was a high risk place for a time.
Yes. That's why the government had laid down rules, 50% staff and
Yeah,
50% occupancy.
yeah,
But still,
yeah,
because those areas are closed, the virus is bound to travel.
right. Yeah, and
So
it's just lots of people with masks.
exactly, we should prefer going to open air restaurants.
Yeah. Yeah, that's definitely much more recommended. And then also being mindful of high risk people in your family. The more high risk people in your family, the less you want to take those chances. But my other piece in there is high risk or children in a school or childcare setting where if they get positive could easily transfer it to other children. So, although not all of my teachers were high risk, they needed to be very careful until they got vaccinated, knowing they could easily pass anything that they got on to children while they're doing basic caregiving activities like changing diapers or picking up a child or holding a child. So they had to act as if they were very high risk. But here's just one other piece to it. Again, is to keep in mind, or this is just something I would tell myself when we were in that very scary place. When I felt frozen and like, oh gosh, am I going to do something wrong? Is to just say, you can only do the best that you can do. So to the teacher who has to take public transit to get to their job, who might be exposed there, do the best that you can do. That's all that you can do. And be mindful of that. But there is a lot that we actually do have control over. There's a lot that we have control over.
Exactly. We, even if we want to go and hug people, we need to control ourselves. Because,
Yeah, so simple things like when you're working with children, this was something that kind of helped us. So when we were at a time, at one point, Dallas was one of the top 5 hotspots in the whole country in terms of rates of COVID. And so I was very worried during that time. And so when we worked with kids, the young children, the very young, the infants and toddlers clearly need a lot of picking up and being held. And so do preschoolers, but not quite as much as those infants and toddlers. And so what we did was, if a child falls, before you just rush in to pick them up, you let them be the lead. Start with the least amount of physical contact and see if that will work. And then, build up to the most, if that's enough. If you can use guiding a child with your voice versus taking their hand, you can do that. If you have to, you can. If you need to hug a child or do some kind of holding, you can hold them so their back is to your front, so you're not face to face, and that can help some. There are strategies for this, and again, wearing those masks, it can be a real help.
yeah, definitely. In fact, thanks for giving this advice that if we need to pick up a child, we should pick them up back facing towards us so that
Yeah,
we do not connect through breath or through mouth.
yeah,
Because generally, what we have a habit, we pick the child and we hug them this way, their heads resting on our shoulders.
Yeah. Just some other things, and once you guys start opening up, I'd be happy to come and or not come there, but do another, just talking through some of these strategies. Because I do train people on it.
Definitely we'll have you again, and if everything goes well, we would love to have you in India and interact with our
Yeah.
people.
Then I do get an Indian mother who'll cook me from home, right?
I'm there.
So yes, there are so many things, and just know that help is out there. And if there's somebody an administrator or a school leader who wants to connect with me, they can, and I can start helping them think about it. Because don't feel hopeless. Just don't. I mean, you don't need to. There are things that work to help make it a much safer place for children and for the educators.
Definitely. Thank you so much. I will not take much of your time because the day is quite big for you. Thank you so much for sparing time for me. And it was pleasure having you here. And definitely we'll have another talk on what else can be done to prevent this.
Sure. Thank you so much, Miss Rena,
Thank you
and
so
much love
much.
from the U.S.
Namaste. Bye bye.
Namaste. Bye-bye.
So here we end our show for tonight. Tomorrow we'll be having Mr. Ramesh Chand Joshi from Gothar. He will be sharing his views. Thank you and namaste.